getting caught with drugs, get caught with a gun, stab somebody, do those type of crimes, they're not gonna come to prison. One of the reasons they're not gonna come.
Like Snoop.
Oh, Snoop would never come. I mean, Snoop was on,
Suge Knight, the co-founder of Death Row Records, is serving time in prison in California for hitting and killing a man with his car. But prison walls aren't keeping Knight from talking about the arrest of his former rival, Sean Diddy Combs. Suge is once again stirring the pot, and this time he took to a live interview with Chris Cuomo to air his grievances. He didn't hold back, calling out everyone from Jay-Z and Dr. Dre to Snoop Dogg, accusing them of staying silent about the serious allegations against Diddy. Suge seems particularly upset with Snoop, alleging that the rapper was the one who set him up and turned his back on Death Row, and Snoop still has a lot of explaining to do about the death of Tupac Shakur. We've got all the details for you. So why is Suge Knight's opinion on Diddy's case so important? He and Combs have a long, complicated history. Back in the 90s, during the East Coast-West Coast feud, Combs was the head of Bad Boy Records, which had Biggie Smalls, while Knight ran Death Row, which signed Tupac Shakur. Both artists were murdered within a year of each other, but that's all history now, and Knight's more focused on today's drama. Though Knight is serving time in a California prison and won't be eligible for parole until 2034, he's not staying quiet. He has a podcast, Collect Call with Suge Knight, where he talks about various issues, including his thoughts on Combs' case. During a recent live interview with Chris Cuomo on News Nation, Knight addressed whether Combs would be safe in federal prison. Combs had hoped to post a $50 million bond, but the judge denied it, sending him to MDC, a notoriously rough federal jail. Knight advised Combs to be cautious in prison and suggested he follow a Jewish diet, saying, "The food's way better than what other prisoners get." Knight also reflected on the dangers of prison life, saying, "Prison and jail are negative environments, where inmates might harm someone just to make a name for themselves. We all know what we sign up for in life," Knight added, acknowledging that mistakes are part of the process, but growth is key. Knight, of course, has a criminal history of his own. Before his current conviction, he was charged with felony robbery in 1994 and later with a misdemeanor in 2010. His current sentence stems from a 2015 incident where he ran over and killed a man in a hit and run, an event that led to his current prison sentence. As mentioned earlier, there was a lot of bad blood between Suge Knight and Sean Diddy Combs years ago, but now both men are fathers, and what happens to them doesn't just affect them, it impacts their children as well. Knight spoke about how Combs' current situation, being in prison, is likely affecting his kids, as well as the children of the accusers involved in the case. Knight emphasized that he doesn't cheer for any man to go to prison, particularly not a black man, as he doesn't believe prison is always the solution. He acknowledged that some people deserve to serve their time, but he added, "It's not something to be happy about, especially when you look at the fact that this man has kids. And whatever happens to him, it's going to affect his kids. And the victims involved in this case, their kids are going to be affected too." As the interview progressed, the conversation shifted to the disturbing details surrounding the alleged parties, referred to as freak-offs, in the lawsuits filed by Combs' ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura and others. The indictment from the U.S. Attorney's Office paints a chilling picture of the allegations against Combs. It claims that he exploited and abused women, using threats and coercion to force them into prolonged sexual encounters with male sex workers. These incidents allegedly took place over state lines, with Combs reportedly orchestrating the events, which he called freak-offs. According to the indictment, these freak-offs could last for days and involved multiple commercial sex workers. The women were allegedly kept compliant with drugs such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs provided. When Combs didn't get his way, he reportedly became violent, subjecting victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. The indictment includes accounts of Combs kicking, dragging, and throwing objects at victims, including a vase at a woman in a Los Angeles hotel in 2016 when she tried to flee. The abuse often left victims with injuries that took days or weeks to heal. Combs is also accused of using the disturbing recordings he made during these freak-offs as leverage, threatening the victims with the release of the tapes if they didn't comply with his demands. The indictment claims that he maintained control over the victims by offering or withholding financial support, promising career opportunities, and even controlling their appearance and where they went. These freak-offs allegedly involved excessive drug use, and some of the participants needed IVs to recover afterward. The entire situation, as described, is horrifying. Suge Knight shared his thoughts on where he believes Sean Puffy Combs might have learned his alleged behavior. He doesn't think Combs' actions came from nowhere, arguing that Combs was influenced by others in the industry, especially those who mentored him when he was younger. Knight suggests that Combs didn't just make these choices on his own, but learned from the behavior of others who were in positions of power before him, and then continued the cycle with those younger than him. He made it clear that the truth lies in the videos, the conversations, and what people have seen unfold. But he emphasized that what people think about the situation is irrelevant. Knight went on to say that Combs learned his actions from others, including some major names in the industry like Russell Simmons, Clive Davis, and Andre Harrell. He implied that these figures, who were allegedly involved in drugs and abusing women, set the example that Combs followed. He referenced an incident involving Nicole from the Pussycat Dolls, claiming that she participated in inappropriate actions with Jimmy Iovine while he was married, further pointing out how the music industry has long had a history of exploitative practices. Knight noted that the casting couch is a real thing in the industry, not just for women, but for men as well. Knight didn't hold back in suggesting that the entire situation should be exposed and that Combs might reveal the truth about what happened, even if it means taking down others with him. He warned, however, that it shouldn't be like other cases where people mysteriously end up dead before the full story comes out. Knight also took aim at other executives, mentioning Jimmy Iovine and others, saying that if their artists got into trouble, it would just be swept under the rug. This bold claim was denied by Clive Davis, who issued a statement calling Knight's allegations completely fabricated. What's notable is that Knight is not the first person to suggest that Combs learned these troubling behaviors from those who mentored him. Gene Deal, Combs' former bodyguard, recently shared on a podcast that Combs' behavior is a result of what he saw and learned from people like Andre Harrell, Russell Simmons, and Clive Davis. Deal explained that when these figures were involved in heavy drug use and abusive behavior, it set a dangerous precedent for Combs, who likely thought he could get away with similar actions. On the topic of the so-called freak-offs, Knight offered his opinion, saying that he wouldn't want to be involved in those parties and that the industry has long had its dark side. He mentioned how, in some circles, there's an unofficial test that young artists have to pass, which involves bizarre and inappropriate behavior. He made it clear that everyone knows what goes on, but no one wants to talk about it. Knight also made shocking claims about Combs' behavior towards women, including an alleged incident where Combs became violent with a woman named Capricorn and forced her into a deal she didn't want. Knight claimed that Combs had to get her to settle by using money, and that the money didn't even come from Combs but from the labels, like Universal, who paid her off. He also pointed out how crazy it was that she would have to pay taxes on the settlement. Knight didn't hold back in making his accusations, arguing that Combs wasn't the only one at fault in the industry. He acknowledged that Combs was part of the problem, but he insisted there were plenty of others who were complicit in these practices as well. As for Combs, his legal team has firmly denied the accusations, with his lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, stating that Combs remains innocent and that they'll fight the charges vigorously. Agnifilo also mentioned that Combs plans to testify at his trial whenever it is scheduled and emphasized that the case will be a he said, she said situation with evidence like video footage playing a key role. Let's switch things up and dive into Snoop Dogg, because Suge Knight recently dropped some serious bombs about Snoop's possible involvement in Tupac's murder. Now, you might be wondering where all of this is coming from. Well, before Tupac was murdered, he and Snoop were no longer friends, something Snoop himself confirmed. In a past interview with Angie Martinez, Snoop opened up about how bad things had gotten between them. He even said that during a private flight with Tupac, Suge, and some other death row members, he got so heated that he considered stabbing everyone on board. Snoop recalled walking to the back of the plane, grabbing a knife and fork, and hiding under a blanket, hoping someone would make a move so he could lash out. He said, "What's up, Pac? Why you doing me like this?" While he sat there, ready for a confrontation. The issues between Snoop and Pac began when the East Coast-West Coast rivalry intensified. Pac had been shot and robbed at Quad Studios, and he believed Biggie and Diddy were involved. However, Snoop always maintained that he had no beef with Biggie. During a BET interview, he said, "Biggie Smalls, he's an artist I respect. I don't have beef with him. I love his work, and it's not personal. I'm just a smooth, peaceful individual." For Pac, hearing Snoop publicly declare his friendship with Biggie, whom Pac saw as an enemy, felt like a betrayal. This didn't sit well with him, and many believe this played a part in the fallout between the two. Some believe the rift may have been fueled by jealousy, with Pac stealing the spotlight from Snoop. Napoleon, a member of Tupac's group The Outlaws, suggested that Snoop might have been jealous of how Pac overshadowed him. "Imagine being the biggest star on death row, and then Pac comes in and takes all your shine," Napoleon said. "So even 25 years later, when Pac's gone, his name still comes up in interviews. Maybe Snoop just tried to take some of that shine back." He also pointed out that even if there was tension between them, Snoop should speak about Tupac in a positive light now that he's gone. Before Tupac joined Death Row, Snoop Dogg was the label's star. He was featured heavily on Dr. Dre's The Chronic, which helped catapult him to fame even before releasing his own debut album. When Snoop dropped Doggy Style, it was a game changer, selling over 800,000 copies in its first week and becoming the fastest-selling hip-hop album at the time. Snoop was crowned the king of West Coast hip-hop, and Death Row was considered the house that he built. He was even Suge Knight's right-hand man, but everything changed when Tupac joined Death Row in late 1995. Suge posted Tupac's $1.4 million bond, and just months later, Pac dropped All Eyes on Me, a double album that skyrocketed him to fame. Tupac became the face of Death Row, quickly outshining everyone, including Snoop, and taking the label to new heights. With Pac's arrival, the power dynamic shifted, and Snoop found himself pushed to the background. The spotlight was all on Tupac, and soon everyone wanted a piece of him. This rapid rise may have been a source of tension between the two. Many believe this jealousy was part of why Snoop and Pac's relationship started to deteriorate. It's also why Snoop didn't follow Tupac to Vegas in September 1996 and wasn't in the car when Tupac and Suge were shot. Snoop has explained that by the time of the Vegas trip, he and Tupac were no longer on good terms. In an interview, he recalled asking Tupac if he was going to Vegas for the fight, but Pac didn't want him to come along. Snoop described the awkward tension during their flight, saying, "It's a 5.5-hour flight and nobody says a word to me, not one word. I'm sitting there thinking." We get off the plane and I ask Pac, "You going to Vegas to the fight?" That was the last time I saw my brother alive. According to Suge Knight, things didn't exactly go down the way Snoop Dogg described. Suge pointed out that they always attended events together, so it struck him as odd that Snoop would ask if he was going to the fight instead of just showing up with them. "We always went to the fight together, always went to the club together. Even when they made that watered-down movie about P.O., Snoop was asking, 'You going to the fight?' and all that," Suge said. implying that something felt off about Snoop's behavior. Suge suggested that the reason Snoop didn't come to Vegas might have been because he already knew something was about to go down, maybe even an attack. "I know Pac did right by him, putting him on all eyes on me, speaking good about him, being real with him," Suge continued. "And if what they say is true, then this call and your phone number will be monitored and recorded." He added that there would be a lot to explain if they ever came face to face. Suge then mentioned that Warren G., a close friend of Snoop's, told him Snoop had a radio with him the night Tupac was shot. "I heard a horn honking outside my house, looked out, and Snoop was sitting in a white Rolls-Royce with a Nextel," Suge said, referring to the old-school phones popular at the time. "Yeah, I know what kind of Nextel he had," Suge continued. "And that thing was picking up what was going on in Vegas. I could hear it, and then Snoop started getting calls. They were telling him Tupac got shot, and he was reacting to it." Suge Knight clarified that the radio was typically only used at events to communicate with security, so it was strange for Snoop to have one when he wasn't with a security detail. "The only reason Snoop would have needed the radio is if he was at the fight with the rest of Death Row," Suge said. "If you don't have security with you, what are you doing with a radio?" Suge also suspected that Snoop might have been involved in a scheme to kill Tupac, especially since he was reportedly listening to the play-by-play of the shooting on his radio. Then all of a sudden, Warren says on the STW, they hear the gunshots over the radio, and someone tells him, "We got them," or "They got shot," or whatever. How would you know that? Why would you have a play-by-play on the radio? During an interview on Drink Champs, Warren G. mentioned that after hearing about the shooting, Snoop went to the hospital to see Pac. Snoop kicked everyone out, told them to get the expletive out, and took off to Vegas to see what was going on at the hospital, Warren said. But Suge disagreed with Warren's account, claiming that Snoop never went to the hospital at all. Warren said Snoop kicked people out and went to the hospital, but Snoop never came to the hospital, period, Suge insisted. In addition to using a radio to follow the shooting and not visiting Pac at the hospital, Suge Knight pointed out another reason he suspects Snoop might have known an attack was coming. Snoop allegedly told Daz Dillinger not to go to Vegas. Suge said, "Daz was on some other expletive. I really don't like bringing him up because I take mental health seriously, and I know Daz has his issues, but he was saying that Snoop told him not to go to the fight, not to go to the club, not to go to Vegas, because something was going to expletive up." Suge added that it wasn't just Daz who was warned. Badass, who was signed to Snoop's label, was also told not to go to the fight. Pac put him on the song and said, "Man, you can go to the fight with me." Pac was like, "After the fight, we're going to the club." But Snoop told him, "No, you can't go. Something's going to happen." Suge concluded that since Snoop didn't warn anyone about what was going down in Vegas, he was likely involved in the plot to kill Tupac. If all these people knew what was going on and didn't say anything or try to stop it, then you're part of it. You're part of that snake expletive. Suge Knight also pointed out that after Tupac's death, Snoop featured on an album by one of the men allegedly involved in Tupac's murder. Suge explained, "Half of this expletive ties back to KPD. Everybody knows this street knowledge. I was locked up, but Snoop, Daz, and the rest of them did a track with one of the expletive from that side, the one who was in the car. He was featured on Big Dre's album, Hard White. Big Dre was a member of the Southside Crips and one of the 4 men in the car that was involved in killing Tupac. In fact, some people believe it was Big Dre, not Orlando Anderson, who actually shot Pac." Suge then questioned, "Who did the song with? Who did the compilation?" The guy behind the compilation was that expletive Dre or whatever his name is, but he ain't here now. But that's that. Suge suggested that Snoop's collaboration with someone connected to Tupac's killers was another form of betrayal. However, it's important to approach Suge's statements with caution. While his claims could be true, Suge has a major beef with Snoop, partly because Snoop took Death Row Records from him. This rivalry could mean Suge has a personal vendetta against Snoop, so it's wise to consider his words carefully. Now let's take a closer look at the latest developments in the ongoing case involving music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. As he prepares for a third bail hearing, new disturbing allegations are coming to light. This week, 5 new lawsuits were filed against him, adding to the mounting legal challenges. The accusations come from both men and women, some as young as teens, while others are in their late 30s. These lawsuits are centered around incidents that allegedly took place in New York and Miami, 2 cities where Combs has lived and worked for years. Attorney Tony Busby, who has already filed numerous lawsuits against Combs, represents over 100 alleged victims. The criminal charges Combs faces, stemming from an indictment in the Southern District of New York, are serious. The charges include racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Prosecutors accuse Combs of using his status as the head of Bad Boy Records and his wealth and power to host illicit gatherings, which allegedly involved illegal drugs, coerced sexual acts, and male prostitutes. According to the prosecution, Combs orchestrated these freak-offs using extreme measures, both legal and illegal, to fulfill his desires. Combs was arrested in New York last September and has been in custody at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. His defense team has been fighting to secure his release on bail, and they are preparing for a third attempt in front of Judge Aaron Subramanian. In addition to facing criminal charges, Combs is now battling a wave of civil lawsuits. The flood of legal action began after his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, filed a high-profile lawsuit accusing him of years of physical, mental, and sexual abuse. While Combs denied the claims, he settled the lawsuit with Ventura the very next day. Since then, more people have come forward, revealing allegations of a darker side to the celebrity lifestyle that Combs has long been known for. They claim that behind the public persona of a beloved rapper and entertainment figure, he was operating as a ruthless criminal. This latest batch of lawsuits, filed by Tony Busby, follows a similar pattern to the others. The plaintiffs allege that Combs and his associates used drugs, including GHB and ecstasy, to spike drinks at parties and auditions, targeting unsuspecting victims. These victims claim they were subjected to forced sexual acts by Combs and his bodyguards. The lawsuits have been filed anonymously and also name Combs companies, including Bad Boy Entertainment and Bad Boy Productions. It's important to note that Combs has consistently denied any criminal wrongdoing. His legal team maintains that any sexual activity that took place was consensual. Furthermore, he has not been found guilty of any crime in a court of law yet. That said, the nature of the accusations has caused many to question the details surrounding these events. While some might find the behavior described unusual, it is not necessarily considered illegal. However, given the gravity of these allegations, they continue to make headlines and fuel public debate about Combs' conduct. One of the recent lawsuits involves a man, referred to as John Doe, who is from Texas. According to the complaint, in the late 90s and early 2000s, John Doe was an actor who frequently traveled across the country for auditions and roles in film and television. In 2001, after learning about an opportunity to play a police officer in a music video, he had a series of phone calls with a female casting director based in New York. Later that year, he traveled to Manhattan to meet her in person. Although we don't know exactly how old John Doe was at the time, we know he was an adult. However, other lawsuits filed by different individuals have included claims of incidents involving minors, which we'll keep in mind as we explore this case. John Doe arrived at a hotel near Central Park, where he met a man he believed to be either Sean Combs' bodyguard or an assistant. They discussed his background and fitness, and then Combs himself entered the room. According to the lawsuit, Combs asked John Doe questions about his trip to New York and whether he was alone. After confirming he was by himself, Combs allegedly made a statement that John Doe later felt was unsettling in light of what happened next. As the meeting continued, the casting director offered John Doe an alcoholic drink, which he declined, but she then gave him a Diet Coke, which he noted tasted unusual. Shortly after drinking it, he began feeling dizzy and nauseous and excused himself to the bathroom, fearing he might pass out. Soon after, he lost consciousness. The lawsuit claims that John Doe's drink was likely laced with drugs, including substances like GHB or ecstasy, a theme that recurs in many of the allegations. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a disoriented state, unable to fully comprehend his surroundings. According to the complaint, he realized he was in an altered state of consciousness and in a compromising situation. He claims that he was assaulted and that others were involved. He reports hearing laughter and voices and believes there were camera flashes during the incident. After passing out multiple times, he eventually managed to gather himself and leave the room. John Doe fled without his underwear or a prized jacket that he had earned while working on a film. He was helped by the doormen to catch a cab, returning to his hotel room where he was physically sick and emotionally distraught. The trauma left him feeling isolated, fearful, and emotionally scarred, impacting his personal relationships for years to come. The lawsuit also claims that John Doe has been suffering from severe emotional distress, depression, and other mental health challenges since the incident, and has struggled with maintaining relationships and dealing with the aftermath of the assault. He is suing under the New York Victims of Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Act, which allows individuals to pursue legal action even after the statute of limitations has passed, up until February 2025. This law also allows plaintiffs to seek damages and recover attorney fees. In a similar case, another individual, referred to as Jane Doe from Maryland, also accuses Combs of assault in 2001. At the time, she was 18 years old and attended a Halloween party at the Club New Yorker in Manhattan. At the party, she claims that Combs and his entourage provided her with drinks. She was later escorted to a limousine where Combs was sitting, along with several members of his security team. Soon after drinking, she began to feel dizzy and disoriented, which she believes was caused by her drink being drugged. Jane Doe alleges that she was forced to perform certain acts by Combs and one of his security guards. Like John Doe, she has since struggled with emotional and mental health challenges, including PTSD, and is also suing under the New York Victims of Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Act. As for the lawsuits involving Combs, it remains unclear what impact, if any, these could have on his federal case. It's very possible that government investigators have already spoken to, or will speak to, the individuals involved as part of their ongoing investigation into his alleged involvement in racketeering and sex trafficking. While it's important to note that these lawsuits are civil in nature and don't involve criminal charges at this time, things could change if a new indictment is issued. For now, we'll have to wait and see what happens next. Thank you for joining us today. I'll see you next time.